Whenever Magnus Carlsen faces Hans Niemann, the tension is high. In this game, Magnus embraces the material imbalance and uses it to directly launch the attack on Niemann's king. A classic display of Magnus turning imbalance into the victory. So let's look at this game. Magnus Carlsen has black pieces and Niemann is white. So Niemann starts with e4. Carlsen goes for the move g6, d4, bishop g7. This is the modern defense. Now Niemann replies with the move c3, strengthening the center. Magnus plays the regular move at d6. Knight f3 is played. Magnus plays knight c6. Now, if d5 is played, then Magnus is not complaining. This bishop gets a bit active, and then later after moving the knight, he can play e6 or c6 to challenge that pawn. So Niemann plays the move h3. Then knight f6 is played. Bishop d3, defending this pawn. Then e5 is played. So Carlsen brings one of his pawns in the center. Both sides castle. Rook e1 is played. And then Carlsen plays the move rook e8. So basically trying to keep some pressure here. Maybe he can try to capture at some point. So he's just improving his pieces. Now in this position, Niemann decides to play the move d5. He gains the space on the queen side. Now, why did he play d5 now? He could have played it earlier as well. But why now? So the point is that when d5 is played, then of course the center would get closed. So he gets space on the queen side, but the center gets closed. And in this structure, what black tries to do is black will try to move this knight and then go for f5, because white will have the space advantage on the queen side, so white will try to do something there. So black, since the center is stable, will try to do something on the king side. Then what's the connection with that and then d5? So basically, if the rook is on f8, then that f5 move will be much more effective. That rook can get active. So Niemann was waiting for Carlsen's rook to get to e8, and then he pushed the pawn. So that when f5 is played, then the rook will not be as active here. So Carlsen plays knight b8 in this position. He's fine with it. He's like, all right, you got the space. I have no issues, but I'll now start putting pressure slowly but steadily on the king side. Then Niemann plays the move c4. So Carlsen plays a5. So he's like, I'm not going to allow you to play b4, c5 so easily. I'll try to deal with that first and then shift my attention on the king side. Knight c3 gets played. He develops the knight to a6. So maybe he can go to c5 and then keep some control on the queen side as well. Then a3 gets played by Niemann. Now bishop d7 gets played by Carlsen. Bishop c2 is played. Then Carlsen plays h6. Now his ideas on the king side begins. Then Niemann plays rook b1. So of course he knows that Carlsen's king side activity is coming. So he's trying to do something on the queen side. So Carlsen plays the move knight h7. So he's ready to play f5. Niemann is like, yes, I am also ready to counter that on the queen side by playing the move b4. So Carlsen plays the move f5 in this position. Then Niemann plays c5. He's like, all right, I'm ready with this. If you want, you can go after my pawn. But then I might get more activity on the queen side. So what was Niemann's plan if this is played? Then in this position, he was planning to play, for example, one of the moves could be to play b5, restrict the knight. Then there can be knight f4. What if b6? No worries. There is no pawn on d6, so he can play d6 himself. Then he can try to create some activity. The position has opened a bit more. And look at the pieces of Carlsen. They are not that active. So Niemann was ready to sacrifice the pawn to open the position, but Carlsen is like, no, I'm not going to allow you that. I will play 8 takes b4 first. I'll go for this exchange. And then 8 takes b4. And now d takes e5. Now it would be like, wait, what? Earlier Carlsen was not ready to go for that. So now what changed? What changed is that the pawn is not on a3. White's pawn is not there. And because of that, if b5 is played, then the knight would get active on b4. The knight would not need to go to b8, because let's say in this case, if this is played, then after b5, knight b4 is not possible. There is this pawn. But now after this exchange, yeah, b5 is not there. So he's like, okay, now I'll take the pawn. So then Niemann is like, okay, that's fine. I'll play bishop e3. I'll put pressure over here, then try to do something. Carlsen plays the move b6. The knight d2 is played in this position. Now Niemann is down a pawn. But he has some activity on the queen side, and what has happened is because this d6 pawn of Carlsen has been exchanged, so there might always be this d6 idea, and Niemann can try to do something there. So knight b7 is played. So in this position, Carlsen is like, I want to cement this knight on d6, so there won't be d6 of white, and then I would be able to keep the pressure on the king side as well. That knight is quite flexible. But then in this position, Niemann plays the move knight c4. He's like, all right, if you bring the knight to d6, I will capture, and then I'll capture this pawn. Magnus Carlsen doesn't want to give the pawn back, so he goes for the move f4, trying to restrict the bishop. Now, before we go ahead with the game, I want to discuss something with you. So, the platform chessneurons.com is aimed at improving your positional chess. The idea is to give you a complete training ground, daily puzzles with detailed grandmaster explanation, weekly videos, instructive vlogs, and soon to be coming full courses. It's all designed to connect together. So you're not just solving or watching randomly, but you are actually following a clear path to improvement. So please check out chessneurons.com and make use of 7-day free trial. Now, let's get back to the game. So Niemann has recognized that things are not going into his direction. He had sacrificed a pawn to create activity on the queen side, but that's not working. So he goes for the move. Bishop takes b6. He sacrifices the piece. C takes b6. Then knight takes b6. So now what is his idea? His idea is that if Magnus plays the move rook b8, then there is knight takes d7, queen takes d7, bishop a4. Then he will get some material back. He will have rook and a pawn for 2 pieces of Carlsen, and then there will be this pressure over the b file. So Magnus is like, no. Material imbalance is fine, but I don't want to give you the piece activity. So in this position, Magnus Carlsen goes for knight d6. So he's like, yes, you take my rook, and then you will basically have a rook and a pawn for my 2 minor pieces, but that's fine. There is no pin. Unlike that line, so at least my pieces are active. Then bishop a4 gets played. So Niemann wants to exchange some pieces so that Carlsen's pressure can be reduced. So bishop takes a4. Now Niemann plays the move knight takes a4. So I think it would have been a bit of a better idea to try to exchange the queens and then deal with that position. So it's quite complicated, quite imbalanced. But I guess Niemann wanted to keep more pieces against Carlsen. He did not want to go into the endgame, an understandable decision. So he goes for the move knight takes a4. Now Magnus plays the move bishop f8. He's like, okay, I want to strengthen this knight. Otherwise, this pass pawn can get pushed. Some other ideas can be played. So knight c5, then queen a7 is played. Then knight e6. The knight gets on the outpost square. But Magnus is not worried. He's ready with the move knight g5. He's not going to allow Niemann to keep that knight there for long. Knight takes g5. H takes e5. Then rook c1 gets played. Then in this position, Carlsen just plays the move king g7, slowly improving his position. Maybe the king can at some point slide over to h6 or f6, and it might be difficult for Niemann to take advantage of that. Niemann brings the rook on the outpost square on c6, but Carlsen is not worried. That knight is well defended by the rook, and he plays the move queen d4. He's like, all right, I'm ready to exchange the queens, because then I'll get the pass pawn. I'll try to push it. So for example, if this happens, if e5, he is not worried. He can play this. And then if something like e6, these pawns are blocked for the time being. And then he can try to say, for example, play this, knight f5. There can be rook b8 type of ideas. There can be bishop d6. There can be some pressure. And it's not one of the most pleasant positions for Niemann to play. So that's why he's like, okay, I want to exchange the queens. I'll pick queen c2 in this position. Carlsen goes for the piece activity. Rook b8, bringing the rook on the open file. And the plan is to get it on the second rank. Rook e2 gets played by Niemann. So he's like, oh wait, that rook is getting on the second rank. I don't want to allow that. So let me bring my rook to e2. So a natural move, stopping that rook from getting there. But now the problem that has happened is that in the quest of stopping Magnus's activity on the second rank, he forgot that Magnus can also do something from the first rank. And then queen a1 check gets played. Of course, if queen c1, then there is rook b1. And rook b1 was played, rook h1 threat is there. And yeah, things are just collapsing. So g4 was played by Niemann, but then after rook h1, he resigned, because after king g2, there is just queen g1, king f3, rook h3 is just mate. So a really nice example of Carlsen on how to make a push on the king side, how to put pressure on the opponent, and then once the material imbalance happened, then how he made use of his pieces to stabilize that knight on d6, and then he made use of the queen and the rook to continue putting pressure on Niemann until he cracked. So thanks everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.